what does gutsy mean to you, my friend?
Gutsy means that you're willing to die to whatever version is keeping you in a potential that doesn't belong to you anymore.
Welcome to the Gutsy Podcast, the show where you learn how to own what you actually want and shift the mind junk that's been holding you back. I'm Laura Ora, keynote speaker, coach, and your guide to help you get clarity, build confidence, and make the gutsy moves that change your life. Each week, I'm going to help you simplify things by teaching you how to get out of your head while stepping into action. This way you can achieve all those life shifts that you've been overthinking. Your desire, that drives you. But gutsy, that's what gets it done. When you are fully conscious, you have the ability to shift anything and everything in your world in the moment. But what does it mean to be fully conscious, and how do you obtain that when your mind is telling you one thing and your body feels the pain and pressure of the stories in your mind that it's latched onto? Today, you're going to learn how to release your mind and your body so that you can break down those identity structures and embody who you really are. Today, I'm chatting with Cortney McDermott, a best-selling author, TEDx speaker, and human potential enthusiast with a Master of Science from the London School of Economics. Her work in the field of self-development and business strategy has been featured in Inc., Women's Health, Success, The Huffington Post, Fox News Chicago, and many other mainstream business and lifestyle media. Court's career highlights include her time as an executive at Vanity Fair Corporation, vice president at Sustainability Partners, and then running her own business with clients and audiences at Universal Music Group, Google, Nike, and Virgin Unite. And since we're talking about the mind today, I know it can get really squirrely up there. Like, you want to do something, you go back and forth, you question it, you're overthinking yourself. But deep down, you're like, I know that I'm ready for a change. I know I want to move forward. I know I want to try something new or go after something. So how on earth do you get out of your own way? Well, good news. I've got a free resource. It's an audio, kind of like what you're listening to on the podcast. If you go to lauraora.com/foundations, I'm going to send you short 20-minute audio episodes once a day, every day for 5 days to teach you my foundational method, the Aura method, to get out of your own way so that you can move forward. This simple ass tool has helped me to get out of my own way more times than I can even count. And because of it, I and thousands of other women have been able to achieve the things that they truly want. Just go to lauraora.com/foundations, put in your email, and I'll send you the first one right away. All right, my friend, Court's got a ton of wisdom to share with you about getting conscious, so let's get into it. Court, welcome to the Gutsy Podcast.
Thank you. Super excited to be here.
Absolutely. So I was doing a little poking around on your website, and I found two fun facts about you that we share in common, which is geeking out on neuroscience and dancing like it's 1999. So I just felt like we needed to establish that ground because to me, it's still the 90s sometimes until I sit on the floor for too long and get up. And then I'm like, oh, actually, it's not.
Oh, I hear you. I hear you. Yeah.
And neuroscience is just like, I don't know. I started to study that probably in the last 18 months or so. And it's just fascinating because it helps us to understand the brain. And I think it's the premise for a lot of the things that you teach and speak about, correct?
Yeah, definitely. I recently, kind of my talks are centering around a few key findings in neuroscience, epigenetics, and quantum physics, and how they all point to the same conclusion of the ability of the formless to change the form, like at any given moment. And so I've been in that rabbit hole, which is an enormous one, for years now. And I just love when I see these overlappings in the findings that help explain a lot of my own experience and the experiences that my clients have had. And yeah, I go into these things as well in the book in a really simple and accessible way, because I also don't like when science is shrouded in a lot of excessive language or things like that. And I think it's so important that we start to understand a little bit more about the inner workings and the outer workings of what it is that we are, who we are, what we are.
All absolutely. All the things that it's like, where was this, right? If we grew up learning this stuff, I think we would just it would be a completely different world, because when you have knowledge is power, right? And when you have that knowledge and you understand even just how you work, gosh, how much more compassion do you have for yourself? And then how much more compassion do you have for the people in your world?
Right. And also just life itself and where it's taking you and the ability to kind of relax into it. Yeah.
Ooh, relax into it. We might come back around to that. So, I know that you have a pretty profound story. So, I'd love to hear your journey. What has led you to where we are sitting here today?
Wow, there's so many stories in the story. I've just lived so many lives in this lifetime and I guess as far as where we are today, a lot of people come at my work from this place of what I was writing about in my first book of having sort of arrived, quote unquote. Like you get to this place where you've reached all these pinnacles of so-called success. And that's where I was. It was like, yeah, I was sitting on the corporate jet and I was, all the things, all the accolades and awards and titles and family and all the things, but I was profoundly unhappy. Actually called it being miserably successful. So it was
Mm,
like I wrote from this place of, okay, I collected all the gold stars and everybody's telling me that I just, need to get this thing and then I'll be okay. And I'm telling myself that, which is when you really buy into the story. So I'm like, what the actual fuck? Like I'm supposed to be there and it's not here. And so that started this really profound kind of like stepping back in a way and going much deeper within, which I think, if anything, is pointing you anywhere else but within you, it's kind of missing the mark, or it's probably totally missing the mark. And so that that place I like taking off from that place of where a lot of people think they might want to get so that maybe it can fast track the yeah, you can kind of bypass maybe some of that and not have to go through all of that seeking. I feel like there's so much seeking that's happening in our culture externally, right? And also externalizing happiness and fulfillment and all the things. And so, yeah, kind of that was very much that turning point. I mean, I think I always say like I had multiple cold shower moments. So it wasn't like one turning point, but it was all of these sort of coming to this cold and lonely hallelujah of like, oh my God, I think this actually is it. It's like Dorothy with the red slippers. So where I am today, I mean, the second book came out this past summer, and I feel like there's so much more an embodiment of those teachings. Like, you kind of go through those things that you need to learn. You talk about them and you get them cognitively, but it started to become more of an experiential knowing. And so, yeah, where I am right now, there's still a lot of upheaval, but the beautiful thing, like right now, I'm getting ready for another huge move. I live in Italy. I'm moving back to the States for the first time in 25 years.
wow.
So there's like a lot of things changing in my life right now. But the beautiful thing is that I feel really calm, like about those things. I feel my body's still trying to catch up, which I was talking about in an interview yesterday, because it's like the somatic responses to things that you might not even be aware of psychically, but it's like your body trying to catch up to where your mind might be in terms of really kind of embracing this ever changing, constant, fresh, new now. So yeah,
That's amazing. Wow. Back to the what part of the States are you moving back to?
my daughter and I are moving to California. I've
Fun.
never lived there. I've been there multiple times. I mean, many, many, many times. But we're moving down to Southern California. We're going to be in Solana Beach, actually.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
Yeah.
There's a part of my soul that lives in California. So I'll be there with you in spirit.
Love it. Love it.
So I have so many fun questions that I want to dig into, and especially with what you were just sharing. But something that really pops up that I feel called to ask about is, this moment where you realize like I have all the things, right? I've achieved all the stuff. I'm in the jet, I'm at the top of my game. I've got everything's where it quote unquote should be, right? But I'm feeling miserable in the inside. I think that's something that a lot of people can relate to in a lot of different ways and aspects in their life or in their business. I also know that in that moment, it's very, very easy to believe the story of, well, I should just continue. I should just stay. Everyone knows me for this. What is everyone going to say or think if I change something, right? And it's almost like this little, it's like a prison at the top, right? So talk to me about what you did differently in that moment to start to change things. Because how did you start to change that narrative to walk away, to change your life, and to get to something that you actually are very passionate about doing?
Yeah, I mean, there are many layers to that. I would say, first and foremost, like I had to kind of park the mind a little bit, which I had been working um, to some degree, but not as extensively as of the past years. But I knew they have this saying in Italian, they say la mente mente, because the word for lie and mind is the same. So, like
Wow.
this idea that the mind lies. And I knew that my mind wasn't like lying to try to jeopardize me in any way, but it was just that I had bought into a story. And so I like how you frame it like that because really they're just a series of narratives or mental constructs that we are allowing to form our identity. And so what I started to do, and I wasn't consciously doing it at the time, actually, I didn't know what I was doing, but what I started to do is I started to get more in my body. And what I didn't realize at that time was how disconnected I was, I could say, or rather, I should say, there was so much stuck, stagnant energy in my body. And I didn't know that by freeing up my body that I would start to free up some space in my mind to look at things differently and create new constructs. I remember there was one exercise in particular that really, really stuck, and it's called shaking. And I learned it from this woman who founded this movement practice called Koya. And she asked us to put both of our hands out in front of us and to shake one hand vigorously. And if anyone's listening and they want to try, it's a pretty cool exercise. Like she had us shaking this one hand. And as we were shaking that hand, she told us the story of a gazelle being chased through the wetlands by a tiger. However, the gazelle gets away. And the gazelle does not go to therapy for the next 10 years about the time that this tiger was shaking her, was chasing her. What the gazelle does is she shakes through every part of her body, releasing the tension, releasing the fear, and goes back to being a gazelle. And when I learned this exercise, I was actually in the south of France and there were parts of my body that I couldn't shake because I had so much stuck energy. Then I found out later in all of my learnings around, neuropeptides and what's happening in your body, what like is happening neurochemically in your body. I realized, wow, I've actually been freeing my body now for years of these neuropeptides that have been really literally stuck and lodged in the different organs of my body. So this isn't like a woo-woo thing. This is very, very rooted also in a lot of the scientific discoveries. But I mean, it's funny. I mean, the West is catching up to what the Eastern traditions knew all along, right? They talked about it as chakras being blocked and, these wheels. And if the wheels are spinning, like they knew it, but we're catching up and our brain body scans are showing what's actually happening in that, in those fields. And so I didn't realize it, like I said, at the time, but in subsequent learnings, I realized, oh, wow, I was actually freeing up these different centers. I was freeing up my physical body so that the mind could actually start to be more easily directed. I think that's another thing that a lot of people don't get is like we say, I think, but in most cases, that's inaccurate. Most people are not thinking. And actually, it would be almost akin to saying, I'm pumping my heart or I'm conducting the trillions of biochemical reactions occurring in my body this second. Most people are not actively doing that. There are cases, like documented cases of people being able to stop their heart or things like that, but they're very, very few and far between. So I think for me to get to that mind piece, it actually took, which is a whole nother rabbit hole that we can go down if you want, but to get there, I needed to free up a lot of that stuck stagnant energy in my body. So that's one of the first things that I did and that I actually kind of invite anyone to do who's ready to let go of some of those constructs that are holding and calcifying the persona you've created.
I love this stuff. I could just like eat it up. So I love the example that you gave about shaking, and that story with the animal is it's so profound because it's like, oh, like when you see it and hear it like that, it's kind of like, well, that just makes sense. You know what I mean? Like it, in other terms, it's just explained in like these really big, radical, unattainable ways. And something as simple as that is like, oh yeah, I could totally do that. However, I think that a lot of people even one step prior to that, would be curious, what does it mean to get more into my body, right? Because this is a brand new concept for almost everybody, right? So can you explain to us what it means and what it might look like to get into and connect into your body?
Yeah, I think we've created a world that, to paraphrase from Einstein, where we're the the master, like we've made the mind the master. And he talked about the imagination as being the all, right? And instead we kind of swapped that out. And I feel like the imagination, the creative imagination exists in the intelligence that is coursing through us, right? And you can call that by whatever name you want to. It is the same intelligence that's sending electrical impulses down to your legs to have them take one step in front of another. It's the same creative intelligence that is governing the path and rotation of the planets. Like, it's that intelligence. And so it's flowing through you. And so when we talk about freeing up the body, or being more in the body, which maybe not the same thing, but freeing up the body, it's like freeing up this vessel, this instrument that the formless is either moving through effortlessly or not moving through effortlessly. And so, again, the formless being that intelligence. So really coming back to, like, oh, okay, you will feel it. Like, people, so lots of times people say, well, maybe I don't know what that means, but you do know what the sensations are in your body that you're feeling that don't feel very comfortable. And I always say, like, let's go there, because you'll know instantaneously too the difference between a narrative, a story, and what's actually happening in your body, the physical sensation. And so lots of times people come to me and they say, like, oh, I feel guilty about this, or I feel sad. And I'll almost immediately stop there if I feel called to. Many times I won't intervene at all, but it's just like, okay, those are mental constructs. Those are ideas. What's actually happening? And the person then will they'll start to kind of tune in a little bit. And it gets easier. It's hard if you haven't been doing this, but they'll tune in and they'll say something, oh, there's a tightness in my gut. There you've identified a neuropeptide that's actually stuck in your gut. And so what's cool about it, what I've noticed in trial after trial with myself and my clients, is you'll start to notice that if you just stay with that physical sensation and kind of the discomfort of it, what actually I've seen categorically happen over and over is that it goes somewhere else. So then people say, oh, like, I don't feel it there anymore, but I feel this cramping down in my shoulder or something. And so we'll go there and we'll kind of stay with the sensation. And usually this literally just takes seconds. I've actually never had it take more than about a minute. And then maybe it goes somewhere else, depending on how activated it's been and for how long. And then it'll be released. And the person say, oh, wow, I'm not feeling any of that anymore. The thing is, we got a lot of those messengers that are very active in our bodies. And so getting into your body, in other words, like freeing your body so that you can embody maybe some of what it is you're ready to step into, to new potentials, that does require freeing your physical body of some of these.
Hmm. Do you find that sometimes these chronic pains, ailments, right? Like I've heard, and I've even been down this rabbit hole myself of, like, you've been to every doctor, you've had every test done, like everything's like you're fine, it's normal, your labs are normal, and you're like, yeah, but I'm still having this problem. Something is not normal. Do you find that there is a connection between that stored energy in the body and kind of, mysterious undiagnosed ailments in the body?
100%. And the brain body scans that we're seeing right now are all illustrating the same thing. What's interesting is a thought impulse will come in, right? Again, just an electrical impulse. We don't know the origin of it. Most people are not consciously originating their thoughts. So this impulse will come in, and we know that most people are having anywhere between 50 to 70,000 of those thought impulses a day. We know that most of those are repetitive thought impulses. So again, calcifying a persona, which is a whole nother conversation, quite interesting if you want to get into that. But then what you see is the repetition and the attachment to that thought impulse is actually releasing some of these chemicals, right? These biochemicals into our bloodstream, into our organs. So then again, this is where we get that stuck energy. And it's fascinating to see from the brain body scans that there is a direct correlation between the types of thoughts and where it goes in the body. So people say like, oh man, my heart or whatever, and you will actually see in a lot of these scans that are being done. I find it absolutely fascinating. Here's what I do believe, going beyond that, because I'm not active in that field in the sense that I'm not doing the scans. I'm just reading the research and applying it as best I can. But what I do believe is a lot of medical professionals and stuff will say like, well, some ailments are psychosomatic. Some ailments are kind of taking off from this place that I'm talking about. And I think we're going to get to a point where we realize that actually they're all coming from there. We just haven't gotten there yet. But I
Wow.
truly do believe that will be clear as day when we come to that unanimous conclusion about it. Yeah.
And it just feeds this whole concept of like, we all have the answers already inside of us, right? Like it just backs that up that we have the information that we need. We have the ability to shift things. We possess the ability to change and to have anything, right? I'm really interested. I do want to come back to this calcification of persona because I've never heard that. So talk to me about what that is because it feels really interesting.
Yeah, so I kind of made this up because in Italy, where up north where I live, there's a lot of there's a lot of calcium in the water, and it kind of can make things really hard, and it's not great, not the best for your hair. But side note, I digress. So I started a couple of years ago, probably about 3 years ago, really becoming fascinated by the word. I'm fascinated by etymology and language, and speak different languages, and always kind of want to know why we're using the words we're using and the impact and the frequency of those words. I'm really fascinated by that. And persona comes from ancient Greek mythology. It was actually the masks they wore.
Mm,
And so when people go around and they say, I'm this kind of person, I'm that kind of person, they actually want you to see them as a specific character in the play. And
wow.
what I find fascinating about this, because again, I kind of like to marry this with other sciences and things like epigenetics and what it's showing us. One of the things that I wrote about in the second book too, I was like, imagine that you had this infinite library of books, right? In this case, I'm talking about potentials, and you pull out the same book every day, and you're like, this is my book, and you memorize all the lines in the book, and it's your book. And not only do you memorize them and you say like, this is my book, but you show everyone else, you're like, this is my book. Make sure that you recognize me as this book. In other words, this person, in other words, this character. And what I noticed is, because I've stepped into so many different characters in my life, but I'm at the point too where I realize like I'm not that character. I enjoy playing that character. I have fun playing that character, but that's not the essence of who I am. And when you start to understand that's not the essence of who you are, and you allow yourself to let go of those identity structures, it's really freaky at the beginning because you wanted everybody, and we're hyper trained to be like, you need to be somebody, and somebody looks like this.
Yeah.
I loved the way Ram Dass, aka Richard Albert, described it. He's like, you go into somebody's special school. Like everyone's supposed to become somebody special. And I just said, like, I fucking love that, because it's like, yeah. So, but what we fail to realize is actually one of the greatest teachings I've ever been exposed to is you're not the body and you're not the mind. And hence your ability to instantaneously transform either one if you are willing to die to the constructs you've created. And I think
Mm,
that's what's meant of die to be reborn. And when we talk about the persona, the concept, like we're literally talking about a character. And I don't know who to attribute this to, but I remember years ago hearing this guy talk about, imagine this man who is interpreting Macbeth every day for years and years in New York, and then all of a sudden he starts to believe that he is Macbeth. Like that's what people are doing, and they go around like, I'm this person, and make sure you recognize me as that and whatever. And when you recognize the ludicrousy of it, you can actually start to just enjoy, and even watching other people's characters, you can just be like, this is so enjoyable. It is so entertaining. Like not in a flippant way or in a way that's in any way, like it's just, let's let it go so that we can actually play, because we are pure potential, and let's just start playing. And rather than like calcifying and sort of, and that's why I like to use that term, because I almost imagine this sort of like twisted. It has to be this way. Like enjoy the character. I love all the characters I play. I love watching the characters of others, but it's like, the million masks of God.
The number one thing that stops women from moving forward, breaking free, and experiencing actual happiness, it's not time, it's not money, it's not responsibilities, it's themselves. I just know that there is something in your world that you are being called towards. A change in your life, a shift in your career, something you want to end and something you want to start. So let me help you cut through the noise and break free from what's actually holding you back. Your thoughts. In my free Foundations private podcast, it's audio just like what you're listening to here, you're going to learn a clear and simple method that is going to allow you to catch those thoughts and shift them in the moment. This is going to let you finally be able to move forward with your desires. Go to lauraora.com/foundations, put in your email, and I will send you the first one right away. Wow. This reminds me of a story, just an observation that I had recently. So during lockdown, I very, very, very heavily got into drinking, right? It became a coping mechanism. It it was helping me to get through things, right? And I think that I drank my entire lifetime's worth of alcohol in that period, and my body started to reject it.
Mm.
So after, I don't know, probably 2 years of it, I was like, I don't think I want, a glass with dinner, or I would only drink like a half a glass instead of 2 glasses. And I'm like, okay, this is kind of interesting. And I'm just really, I love to observe things and to like bird's eye view, look at what's happening. And I got to the point where I literally couldn't drink anymore. And so I don't call it sober. I don't label it because I don't think that it needs one. I just don't drink.
Yeah.
And I couldn't tell you how long it's been, but here's what was interesting. When you make a shift like that, right? And this to me feels like what you're talking about, this kind of identity shift. I identified as like, oh, I'm a wine drinker, right? Like I basically made my plans on wineries and the rosé all day stuff. And I'm not saying any of it's wrong or bad. It just that's what I was, right? When you identify outside of that, or when you release that identity, it's almost like you can see it from a whole different perspective with blinking lights on. So I remember we were at a restaurant one night and everyone's drinking, right? It's a Friday or a Saturday night, and people are at the bar doing shots, and wine flights are coming and all this. And I just remember observing. I'm not judging, I'm just observing. And I'm like, wow, I can clearly see as a society how we use this as a tool to form an identity.
Yes.
And now that I no longer associate with that identity, I can see and understand it so much more clearly. And it's just interesting to observe how others do still identify. And again, I'm not making it right or wrong or in between. It just is an observation. And I don't know, it's just fascinating to me.
Yeah, I love that. I think it's a great illustration of what happens when you step out of polarization.
Yeah.
Either way. Like, and that is what we're constantly being invited to step out of. Like Shakespeare said, nothing neither good nor bad, but thinking makes it so. And it's such a beautiful place. Like for me, every time I've been able to I guess it's captured in the Tao, it's kind of like every time I've been able to just like you not label something and actually just to use the word you use, to just observe it, to just be in presence with it. It's so disarming to the mechanism itself. So when you talked about us really brilliantly, talked about us using that as a mechanism, as a tool, it is very much that, because our consciousness, I mean, consciousness is a huge word, and you actually can't label any of it anymore. And therein lies the dissolution of the mechanism, of the holding pattern that has kept that in place within the collective consciousness, if that makes sense.
Oh, it absolutely does. Yeah. How would one know if they are fully conscious?
Wow. anything I could say here would be pointing to it, like the way they talk about not mistaking the finger for the moon. I, when I've been in what I would call fully conscious or awakened states, which I've experienced many times, um, what the experience has been like has been it's almost like this, it's a weird thing to describe because it's like a euphoric calm.
Yeah.
It's a euphoric calm. It's like, even recently, I've had a lot of micro experiences with this of like, there's so much to do, quote unquote, and there's so many things, so many moving parts. And and my mind is very calm. And yet there's this activation energy, this excitement activation energy that is riding that calm. And everything becomes just exciting. And in this way, though, in this way, like sometimes I joke, like I can't get to bed at night because I'll be so excited about certain things. And they'll be what most people would consider the most mundane things. Like I'm getting up to make my mocha and I just like can't get to sleep because I'm so excited that I get to do those things. Um,
Yeah.
and I think as well, when you're in that state, one of the things that I often have noted is that the doing happens through you. So, as a result of just who you are, who you recognize yourself to be, and your awareness of that intelligence, because really fully conscious is just all it means, I guess, is you're fully aware of the intelligence in you. And I'm obviously not talking about these rational idealizations that we have. I'm talking about that power that's just coursing through and ready to move through and as you in every moment.
Yeah. And I'm certain everyone has experienced it, whether it was for, a minute or an hour, is irrelevant, but it's a whole nother level of that, right? Being conscious that you're conscious is kind of a whole nother paradox. And I know for me, when I'm fully conscious, I can 100% back up what you just said. There is just this stillness that it's like there's nothing to do. I just am. And all that mind noise, it just dissipates, right? The need to do or fix or figure out is is non-existent. You just are. And I feel like that's the highest level of embodiment and alignment that you can experience is when you just simply are.
Mm.
It's like all of those personas that you talked about are like the waters have parted and you just it's you. And I think it's so beautiful, but I also know that it freaks people out,
Oh, yeah.
right? The idea of that freaks people out because now we're talking about being seen as who we really are.
Mm.
I mean, that can be really terrifying, but I want everyone to hear us right now that it is the most beautiful thing that you'll ever experience to be seen as who you truly actually are.
Yeah, I think any fear of being seen as you are stems from a misunderstanding of what you are.
Mm,
So if you believe that some aspect of your personality is who you are, which a lot of people conflate these things, they think, well, really, if people saw that I was this greedy or if I was this angry or whatever, then they certainly wouldn't accept me. But again, those are not who you are. They're not what you are. And the moment you start to shed those again, they're constructs. Then you're faced with the magnitude of who you are, which is really, really intense because what you are is all of it,
yeah.
truly. And even if we look at that from everything that science is demonstrating as well, like a wavicle, that's it. That's the whole damn thing.
That's the whole damn thing.
Yeah.
So let's come back up to our friend the mind, right? It's the most
Mm.
beautiful, complex part of ourselves. How, we've talked a lot about the body and working with that and releasing things. How do we get our mind on board? Because
Mhm.
that's the thing, as you know, it's gonna take us one way or the other. So how do we get our mind on board? What are some things that we can do to begin to shift those constructs or those personas that you've been mentioning?
Mm. Yeah, I'll share definitely a few kind of top line things, at least a couple of top line things. The mind is a very intricate mechanism, as we know. And as also we don't know, people talk about synapses or the connections between your neurons, almost as if we have this linear system. A lot of people say coding, decode your mind or all these kinds of things. But actually, your mind is a very, very complex ecosystem, an incredibly complex ecosystem with, 100 billion neurons. Like you got a lot happening up there. And what I think is really important for people to try to do, at least at first, is definitely not try to control the thoughts, because we get this, kind of hammered in with a lot of the quote unquote new age, even if maybe it's not so new age anymore, but this idea of, positive affirmations and all of this, it's like incredibly hard to turn the ship around through that. And especially if you haven't ever had any mind training in your life. And in fact, most of us not only have not had that training, myself included, I didn't have that training until it was really self-imposed. But not only do we not have it, we're actually trained in the opposite regard. So we're trained to be, just have our attention go off on any which thing, and be very, very fragmented. And it's like that line in the Bible, a divided mind is unstable in all its ways. And so we're actually trained in that way to become really unstable in the ways we use our mind. So one of the first things that I invite people to consider and to know about the mind is that part of the mind called the reticular activating system, which, many people listening, I'm sure, have heard of. It's such an important piece to understand in order to start redirecting, or start, I wouldn't even say redirecting, to start directing. Is there's this part of the mind that's sole function is to find what you're looking for. And whether you're aware that you're looking for it or not is it depends a lot on just your awareness in any given moment. But it's like a search engine, right? So most people will ask questions that they're maybe more or less cognizant of. So some people will ask questions like, how come all the good ones are taken? Or why can't I lose the extra pounds, right? And so, or, why do I see this everywhere? And even if you may not be familiar with this part of the brain, you've seen it in action so many times. Like one of the examples I like to give is years and years ago, I was working at the North Face, the outdoor company. And as soon as I started working there, all of a sudden everyone was wearing North Face jackets. And it wasn't like everyone ran out and bought stock and then product in the company that I was working in. It was like, oh, wow, my reticular activating system is actually saying this is important to you now. So let me show it to you, because we're exposed to a gargantuan amount of data every day, every second, actually. So our mind has to have this built-in filter system so that we can survive and not go mad. And so what's beautiful is once you understand this part of the mind, one of the most powerful ways to start directing it is just to insert a question. And I like to propose a question rather than an affirmation, because your subconscious will really struggle with an affirmation that you have ingrained the opposite thought pattern, right? So if all of a sudden someone's saying, I'm super thin, I'm super thin, I'm super thin, but they've been kind of, that other thought pattern has been so active in their psyche for so long, that's really not going to go very far, because there's just going to be this internal lack of recognition and lack of action, right? But if it's more like, what does how does a thin person eat, or whatever your thing is. I mean, it could be anything. I've just seen that a lot of times, that people maybe are more thinking about those kinds of things in the body. But it really could be anything. One of my favorite questions now for actually, I'd say about a year, has been, who is she?
Mm.
So whoever the she or he that you're stepping into, or whatever gender you associate yourself with, is just, who is this person? Again, it's a character. So like, who is this person? And you just get to play with that question and allow, from that powerhouse of your imagination, allow some of the answers in the field to start mirroring back to you what it is that you're inviting in to play with. And so just understanding this basic function of the mind is really, really key, I think, for people to start moving into different character plays. Again, you're playing a character. I really go into a lot of thought in the second book, because of the fact that I think so few of us actually know how to direct our mind, and the importance of being able to do that until it's no longer important. Because the other thing I'll say and is, when you actually, I think for me at least, that training was a prerequisite. I couldn't be where I am around this unless I had done that. But you're really mm, informing the form all the time through your attention. So I think starting to master, regain your attention, taking some of that back. And if you think about it, that's what companies around the world are investing the most for. That's your most precious resource, whether you know it or not. They are investing trillions to capture your attention. So if you start to understand that and you start to say, wait a second, if it's that, if it's that valuable, if my attention is that valuable, what would happen if I started to take it back?
Mm.
And just noticing, like, there's times of the day, that's another thing that I would invite people to, is like, really, there's some key times of the day. You're most programmable first thing in the morning and last thing at night. And that's because you're shifting in and out of different brainwave frequencies that are more or less compatible with imprinting, with learned, with retention of learnings, with the release of human growth hormone, with the release of catecholamines, which are vital for learning and memory. You are literally at least twice a day coming in and out of these frequencies. So capturing those pockets of time to start to move your attention toward what it is you want instead of what you don't want. Like that in and of itself, just the first 5 minutes and the last 5 minutes, and you will start to see some massive changes within a very short time.
Mm. That's a really key thing, and I'll say that because again, just another quick personal story. I have developed a habit of just grabbing my phone first thing in the morning, right? Wait, I mean, how many millions of people around the world, do the same thing? It's plugged in next to my bed. It's right on my nightstand. It's easy to just roll over. My eyes are half awake, and I'm just like, oh, what's happening in the world? Who needs me, right?
Mhm.
And I realized I'm like, gosh, this there was a morning, I don't know what happened, but there was a morning where I didn't get on my phone, and I noticed there was like a lot of information coming in, right? I'm very intuitive, I'm clear everything, so I sense a lot of things very quickly and easily. And I noticed that I started to receive all this information, and then I was able to like move very quickly, but in a very like intentional, sharp kind of way that moved things in a positive way in the direction that I want to go in. And I was like, oh, this is
Mhm.
kind of interesting, right? This is kind of interesting. So, what if maybe I change the morning habit and I plug the phone in another room and I don't check it before 10 a.m.? And I'll tell you, every part of my being, every part of my mind is like, that sucks. What if people need you? You need to be available. This is what we do. Now I'm bored. And so there was all this pushback, but it's been 2.5 weeks since I've done this. I think that I have been more energetically productive in the last 2.5 weeks than I've been in the last 2.5 years.
Mhm.
And it's all because I captured that morning time frame that you were talking about when I am the most open. What made me realize like I'm the most open in the morning, and I'm just letting the world pour in.
Mhm.
Everyone's thoughts, everyone's problems, everyone's posts, everyone's successes, like everybody's stuff is just pouring in when I'm wide freaking open,
Exactly.
right? And I'm like, actually, how about I take that back?
Yeah.
Let me harness that power, and it'll be interesting to see how this continues to grow. But it just reminded me of what you were just sharing, like being just really intentional, and it doesn't just happen overnight, right? Like I fought myself mentally for days until I realized, like, oh, I can do other things, right? I can do the meditation that I've been wanting to do. I've been stretching. I sit out. One of my favorite things to do is sit outside with my coffee in the morning, first thing in the morning. Everything is still, it's quiet. The birds are chirping. The air is a little cool. The sun's really warm. It's just, I don't know, it just does something for my soul. And I've been doing that like almost every day. So it is possible. You just have to be willing to lean into those things so that they can be your reality.
Yeah. And this is an incredibly difficult drug to get off of. Maybe the most of our current, like the current attention epidemic. And um, so I would also suggest to people, like, you were epic to be able to just say, oh, now I'm just going to ignore it until 10. For most people, that would literally be like, okay, I'm just completely cut off. And incredibly just jostling. So even like I said, even just that 5 minutes to just recapture and do something for yourself, just something. I love the coffee outside. I love, and again, it's different strokes for different folks, like really feeling into what's that thing that I've been putting off. Maybe it's stretching, maybe it's going for a little walk, maybe it's um, just connecting with myself. Maybe I'm going to like get up and hug myself or whatever it is, but um, leaving aside other people's priorities for just those first 5 minutes and last, and then starting to let that grow as you notice the impact that it's having. I'm very much like you. I've been for years, and I write about how I did this in the second book, but I like my phone is 3 rooms away, and I definitely don't check it first thing. I normally have my phone off, or at least I have data off, which means only people who, and I have emergency contacts. So it's like only basically people who are my emergency contacts can call me. And so I'm just not available. And I remember the first time also that I did this, and I was saying to some executives and I was working with at a Fortune 500, I was just like, I'm not going to be available for a week. And they're like, what do you mean you're not going to be available? And actually, then every single one of those same executives are like, how did you do that? Like, what's going on?
Mm.
And I want to be by you because the energy that I feel by you is, this. So it's really about enhancing your own light, your own field, however you want to conceive of it, your own energy, so that you can bring your gifts into the world. And so I love that you're doing it. And I love this invitation to everyone through your story.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been profound, and I just want to reshare how much power we all really have, right? Like it was just the construct that you mentioned. It was just the story that I had, which formed into a habit, right? Of checking the phone, right? And it's just this is just one way, right? And we tend to do these in all different kinds of micro ways in our lives, in our businesses. And I think that sometimes people think that big changes require big changes, and sometimes that is true. But those big shifts happen with the small ones, right? Those that deciding to not check the phone, or the deciding to connect for 5 minutes in the morning, or deciding to go left instead of right, right? Like whatever the story is, like it's in those micro moments that you begin to make that change. Because I would imagine you didn't go from, having that job that you were talking about with the being on the private jet and being on top of the world to being a speaker and an author. Like that didn't just happen overnight. I'm sure that that would have been way easier, but it's just not the way that it works.
Right, right, absolutely. It's what's been called the miracle of compound interest, or like the eighth wonder of the universe, I think Einstein called it, which is so funny. I think I've mentioned Einstein a few times today for some reason. He's on my brain.
He's on your brain. He's with us today.
Like Stephen Hawking's was on my brain earlier, and now it's Einstein. I don't know what's happening. I'm just, yeah, with all these great scientists. Anyway, they're just wanting to be here. But yeah, he called it the eighth wonder of the universe, like the compound interest. And people normally think of it in terms of financially, right? So like if I give you a penny today and I compound that for a month, I'll often ask this question, like if I do that for 1 month, or if I give you 2.5 million right now, which one would you choose? And
Mm.
almost everyone will say the 2.5. You'll get the rare, it only happened to me one time where I got the rare mathematician who actually knew the answer was somewhere in between. But if you're in like a 29-day month, if you hit day 29, you've gone over slightly over the 2.5. If you hit day 30, you've gone over 5. If you can hit day 31, you've gone over 10 million. And that's how it works with these little micro habits. And it goes both ways. It goes both ways. So sometimes people are like, oh, well, it's no big deal because I'm just having a little bit every day, of whatever it is. Or, but arsenic builds up in your system after a while. Like, yeah, you can maybe take a little bit and be okay, but after a little period, you're not going to be feeling so hot. So and probably that's a really quick period, but there's other things that we just don't realize. And it's this like either slow degeneration or slow evolution into more of your potential. So, or less of your potential. So I think it's really important that people do notice that to sort of ease in too, because the shock that comes internally into your nervous system when you try to just go straight forward. This is why most people, when they go to the gym the first day of the year or second day of the year, and kind of work their brains out, it's like, oh, they maybe can sustain that for a few days and then their body just kind of goes into shutdown. So it's really inviting it in slowly. and knowing like you're safe and it's okay to just experiment with some of this stuff. And it's all an invitation. Like you don't have to do anything. You already are everything.
Mm. Oh, that's beautiful. Court, I can most certainly talk to you all day long and geek out further about this stuff with you. I want to make sure that everyone knows where they can find and connect with you. So, what's the best place to find you on the internet?
So my name is Cortney with just an O. So it's Cortney. So Cortney McDermott. And that's my full handle on places like Instagram, LinkedIn. I love when people connect with me, especially if they tell me they listen to an episode, because I get to like check out what they're doing. And I think that's super fun. I really like Instagram and LinkedIn primarily. We're in a couple other places, but those are the ones where I will often check into. And my website is either Cortney McDermott, the full URL, or Court Inc. So CORTINC.com. And the books are available wherever books are sold. So you can find them on any online, and also a lot of brick and mortar. So yeah.
Perfect. We'll make sure we link all of those in the show notes.
Thank you.
Court, I would love to know, what does gutsy mean to you, my friend?
Gutsy means that you're willing to die to whatever version is keeping you in a potential that doesn't belong to you anymore.
Mm, amazing. Thank you so much for being here with us today and sharing your guidance. The work that you're doing in the world is profound, and I can't thank you enough for being here.
Thank you. You too. Thanks for having me.
You know, something I think is just the coolest thing in the whole freaking world is just watching people do what they love to do. I think it's evident that Court is doing that. I watch so many women step into that inside the Gutsy Collective. I get to do it, and I gotta tell you, it is contagious being around people that are just on fire with themselves in a good way. It's amazing. So I just want to send you a little kudos that by being here and listening to this and any other episode, you are making room in your life and you are making the gutsy changes that is giving that to you as well. Come say hey. I love to hear about what you have taken away from this episode. I'm at that Laura Ora on all social platforms. And until I see you next time, stay gutsy.